Hey, this is Dr. Keel, and this is a video on how we did an epoxy flake floor in one of the garages on my house. I've been wanting to remodel my garages for several years, so I finally decided to do it. And this was the final step, was to epoxy both floors. So the garage in the house, the main house, we're doing an epoxy flake floor, and then my detached garage, I'm going to do a metallic floor, and that'll be in an upcoming video. What I'm showing right here is the first and most important step, and if you're going to do an epoxy floor, and that is to properly prep the floor. A lot of the DIY floor kits that you can buy at Lowe's or off Amazon typically has some type of acid etching, or basically they want you to wash it and then use an acid etch, and that's a terrible way to do a floor. Those floors won't last. You're lucky to get maybe 1 year out. First of all, epoxy and water don't mix. You want your floor as dry as possible so that the epoxy can bind. So what I'm doing here is actually grinding the floor, and that's the best way to get a lasting result, is to grind the top layer of the finished floor off. Most interior floors, when they're finished, have a smooth, shiny appearance. So I'm using a 10-inch grinder here with a 30 grit diamond blade on it. Basically, it knocks off about 1/16 of an inch the top of the floor. At the same time, floors over time, especially when you're driving vehicles on them, they get road debris and oil and things on the floor. So the first step is to make sure you grind the floor, and we use that epoxy, or that 10-inch grinder that my buddy Brian got for me from Sunbelt Rentals. And it took about 2.5 hours per floor. Each floor is about 500 square foot. The next is, so this is in the actual garage that we're going to be epoxying. So this has a sloped floor, and it has a little stem wall. So the first step is to epoxy the stem wall. So in doing a flake floor, basically you put down a base coat, which is also a sealer coat for the concrete, and then you throw the flakes into it. So when you have these little vertical walls like this, it's easiest to start with that. So basically we went around the entire garage and used a 4-inch roller to roll the epoxy up on the concrete. The epoxy I'm using is stone coat countertop flooring epoxy, and that's a 2-part epoxy. It's mixed 2-to-1 by volume. 2 parts of the part A, which is the epoxy, and then 1 part B, which is the hardener. So initially you're going to do, for an epoxy flake floor, I'll do 1 ounce per square foot, and this is about a 500 square foot garage. So as you can see, we basically went around and painted all the walls the first time with the epoxy, and then we went back, and I had a roller. This is my good friend Don Rand, who's helping me. So he's following behind me, and we basically did a second coat. And then right after I put the second coat on, because the first coat is going to absorb into the concrete somewhat, so you want the fresh epoxy to throw the chips into. He's basically just throwing them up on the wall. He's also using a 6-inch putty knife to kind of drag them up the wall. And then as we go back, and the flakes that aren't sticking to the wall, we're scraping those off, so that way they're not in the way when we do the main floor. So we're basically just working our way around the garage. I also decided to epoxy the steps. Those are actually brick steps. I did grind the top of the steps to clean them up, and then used a wire brush on the vertical surfaces. And we're going for full coverage here. So basically we're trying to cover every bit of the wall with as many flakes as we can get to stick. So as you can see there, I'm taking the putty knife and basically scraping along the bottom of it to get the flakes that weren't stuck to the floor. So we kind of keep our area cleaned up as we go. This video is shot in, or shown in double speed, just to keep the video length shorter. This whole process for epoxying this garage took about a little over 2 hours. So now we've got the perimeter done. Now we're going to do the base, the main floor. So I'm mixing up additional epoxy. The stone coat epoxy, I use it for all my different epoxy projects. It's top quality stuff, and it's always very consistent in the results. I've never had any issues with it. So basically, where we're mixing it, we're doing what's called the 3P2 method. So I mix the epoxy for 3 minutes in one bucket, 5-gallon bucket. Then I pour it into a second 5-gallon bucket. We scrape the edges, and then we mix it for another 2 minutes. And that's because any unmixed epoxy is going to stick to the edges of the bucket. And this prevents having what are called sticky spots, where basically you pour unmixed epoxy onto your work surface. So you want all the epoxy thoroughly mixed. So what I've been doing here is I've got a 5-gallon bucket with, again, 1 ounce per square foot for the main part of the floor, and I'm pouring that out around the edges at first. And then Don's taking a 24-inch floor squeegee, and he's basically squeegeeing the floor. So at 1 ounce per square foot on concrete, you're just going to basically getting a skim coat. And the idea is to cover all of the floor with the epoxy. And then once we get the floor fully covered, we'll roll the floor and then throw the flakes. So he's just working his way around the wall, making sure to get the epoxy right up to the edge of the wall where we've already done the vertical portion with the flakes. And I'm just using a small 4-inch roller to roll the areas that it's hard for him to get So when you're only using 1 ounce per square foot, you end up having to push some of the epoxy because it's going to be in pools. So he's got the roller, and that's an 18-inch roller. It's a microfiber roller that it's made for you doing epoxy. And then basically I've got the squeegee, and I'm using it upside down to be able to push product to him to where he can get a good roll on it. Now he's cleaning up the squeegee, and we just use 91% isopropyl alcohol and some paper towels that'll remove the epoxy. I've got the roller now, so I'm going back up to the front of the garage, and basically I'm back rolling the entire floor. And what this does is it evenly spreads, make sure that you evenly spreads the epoxy out, so you have an even coating across the whole floor. And I'm wearing spike shoes. Actually, they're baseball cleats. And then Don's got some spikes that strap onto his. So now I'm just about finished rolling the floor. And as you can see in the front corner, he's got a bucket of the flakes. And the flakes are just small paint chips. I'm using a mixture of white, gray, and black for this floor. And the chips are anywhere from an 1/8 to about 3/16 in size. And they're just all mixed together in a bucket. So he's just randomly throwing them out on the floor. And now I've started in the back corner doing the same thing. And basically you just kind of pitch them up in the air or throw them so that you get a random pattern on the floor. And you can do this different ways. The base coat is tinted with black dye, so it makes it look almost like black paint on the floor. So we're basically just trying to cover so that we don't see any of that black base. So this is called flaking to rejection. And of course, the way we're throwing these flakes, we're throwing more than we actually need on the floor. So what we'll do the next day is we'll come back, and any of them that don't stick, we'll just scrape off. And also I use a blower to blow the excess flakes up into the corner, and then shovel them up and put them back in a bucket, and they're good to use the next time. So here we are, we're just going around making sure we've got all the flakes covered. I ended up using about 100 pounds of flake on this floor. And then by the time we picked them all up, the excess, it left about 80 pounds of flakes to do this 500 square foot 2-car garage. So here I am going around, and I'm just peeling the tape. We tape the bottom of the wall and around the steps, just so that when we're using the roller and roll the epoxy on, that we didn't roll the epoxy on the drywall. Now the floor is fully flaked. At the area where the garage door comes down, about an inch inside where the garage door lands, I actually cut a 1/4 inch groove in the concrete all the way across and angled the front of that just a little bit. And the idea was that allowed an area for the epoxy to go down in that, so that when you drive cars on it, you're not hitting the edge of the epoxy. It actually goes down in a little bit, and it kind of creates a nice ending point. And then when we taped off right behind that. So that ends up filling with epoxy, and then we're flaking. So now, this is the next day. Then everything is dried. I didn't show video, but I scraped the entire floor, getting all the excess flakes up, and then I go over it a couple of times with a blower, and basically it blows off all the excess flakes up into the front corner where I picked them up with a broom and a dustpan, and then just put them back in a bucket. So now, the next day everything's dry, so now we're putting in on the top coat, and I use Polyaspartic top coat, again made by Stone Coat Countertop Company. And the base was applied at 1 ounce per square foot. This top coat mixed up a 1/2 ounce per square foot, because it's a really thin. This doesn't have to be troweled on. We use a roller to roll this on. Since we started at the front of the garage and are working our way back, we don't have to wear spikes for this because we're not stepping in it. So we basically did the same thing. We went around and rolled all of the edges first and rolled the steps, and then now Don's coming back with an 18-inch microfiber roller, and he's got his paint tray there that's got the Polyaspartic. Polyaspartic is also mixed at a 2-to-1 ratio by volume. So we mix it up and then pour a little bit at a time in that tray so he can roll it out. So what he's doing is he's overlapping each stroke by about 50%. So if you watch him, he's that way he gets good coverage, and then you'll watch him, he'll go back and just kind of back roll that area that he just went, and that's making sure that he gets everything spread out really nice. It's pretty easy to tell on this where he's rolled at, because once the top coat goes on, the flakes actually look darker, particularly the black flake. You can really see it start to shine. This Polyaspartic top coat, it gives it a high gloss finish, so it's really pretty, and it's also extremely durable. So the base coat, once it's mixed up, you have about an hour working time. So you don't have to get in a super big hurry, but you have to work efficiently. So it's definitely good if you're doing a garage this size to have two people. And same thing with this Polyaspartic. We've got about an hour to put this on once it's mixed before it starts to setting up a little bit. So I've mixed and he's rolling, and I'm just moving his tray around to where he can just keep moving. So this Polyaspartic, the top coat, it takes about 24 hours to dry. You can actually recoat using this material the next day if you need to, just as long as you do it within 24 hours. If you go over that, they recommend sanding it with 220 grit sandpaper, but we actually only needed to do one coat because I checked the floor the next day, and we had really good coverage, and all the flakes were fully covered. So cost breakdown on doing this floor. So this is roughly a 490 square foot floor. We used 4.5 gallons of the flooring epoxy, which runs about $170 per gallon. And then we used about 2.5 gallons of or 2.25 gallons of the Polyaspartic top coat, which runs about $250 per gallon and a half. The flakes were about $140 for 40 pounds. We purchased these I purchased these off Amazon. So total cost on doing this floor was a little over $1,000. And it took me 2.5 hours on one day to grind the floor. I rented the grinder, had to buy the grinding blade, which was $120, and then about 2 hours to flake the floor the first day, and another hour and a half the second day, applying the top coat. So right here you can see that tape edge. That's where the groove is cut in the concrete, just on the front side of that. And that allowed the epoxy to go down in there. So that way when you drive over it, you don't have an edge that's sticking up. It actually rolls down into the concrete. It also, since this is the weak edge, since it's not up against the wall, this would be the place if we're ever going to have any issues with peeling or delamination. This is where it would start. So that's why it's important to and we had a little bit of product left, so he's basically just taking the extra product and rolling the front part next to the garage door. the top coat goes on really easily, as long as you do 50% overlap on each stroke. And once it dries, you don't see any lap lines in it, which is nice. And now finally we're just rolling right along the edge of that tape where that groove is. And he's just got just a little bit of product left, so he used it up. Last thing we do, we're gonna close the garage door. The garage door sits just behind the tape edge, so it's not gonna impact the epoxy drying. So we close the garage door part of the way. We're pulling out the tape, and now you can see it leaves a real nice finished edge. Put the door down and let that dry overnight. So here's the next day. This is the finished floor. I'm standing on it, walking around. It's a little bit hard to tell in the video is how glossy this floor is, but if you see it in person, it's extremely glossy. There, I try to show a little bit of the shine there where the light's coming in. So we got a nice even coating on our flakes, and it's just an extremely durable floor. So thanks for watching.